and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. As the trade deadline for a tariff deal with the United States looms, South Korea's newly appointed industry minister is now in Washington for talks. In the meantime, U.S. President Donald Trump threatened trading partners, saying Washington will only lower tariffs if a country agrees to open its market, adding that those that fail to do so will face much higher tariffs. With less than 100 days left until the APEC leaders' meeting takes place here in South Korea, there are renewed hopes that the meeting will serve as an opportunity to show that Korea is back on track, following the political turmoil last year. So as more countries continue to move to strike tariff deals with the United States, South Korea is no exception. Seoul's trade officials are set to hold talks with their U.S. counterparts in Washington for 2 days starting Thursday local time. For more on this, we have our Park Konu on the line for us. Konu, do tell us more.
Yes, Sunji, with Trump's deadline for reciprocal tariffs approaching, South Korea is entering the final stages of negotiations in Washington. Industry Minister Kim Jong-kwan landed in the U.S. on Wednesday for 2 days of talks with Trump administration figures, including Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Energy Secretary Chris Wright. The meetings are taking place following the U.S. reaching a deal with Japan to lower tariff rates from 25% to 15%. On questions about the deal between the U.S. and Japan, Industry Minister Kim said it was too early to make any judgments.
We're carefully examining the U.S.-Japan deal to determine how we should respond. Some elements we can refer to, while others need more of a comparison.
Speaking on Trump's latest remarks, warning that countries unwilling to open their markets won't see any tariff relief, Kim said that's been Trump's consistent stance and that the government has been closely monitoring the situation. He said his visit can be described as a full-court press, aiming not only for tariff cuts, but also to bolster cooperation in key strategic sectors, such as manufacturing and energy. Finance Minister Gu Yun-chul, along with Chief Free Trade Negotiator Yeo Han-gu, was set to participate in a 2+2 high-level meeting on Friday over tariffs with their U.S. counterparts, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. However, we've just learned that the meeting has been canceled due to Bessent's urgent schedule. A finance ministry spokesperson said the U.S. has proposed rescheduling the meeting within the next few days, and both sides are working to set a new date as soon as possible. So it seems we'll have to wait and see for any further announcements, as this could be the last chance for South Korea to achieve a breakthrough. So that's all I have for you now. Back to you, Angie.
All right, Kono, thank you for that report. And so as we just heard, South Korea is making last-minute efforts to strike a trade agreement with the United States before the August 1st deadline set by U.S. President Donald Trump. For more on this, we're joined by Professor Min Jung-un, professor at Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Professor Min, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
So although the meeting set for Friday, the 2+2 meeting, has been canceled, it appears that the industry minister and the top trade negotiator will still be able to hold meeting with their American counterparts, right?
Yes, as you mentioned, I think that South Korea's top officials for trade and economy are meeting their American counterparts for trade talks sometime this week. And the meeting comes just a week before the scheduled end of the U.S. pause on reciprocal tariffs on South Korea. And I think that the key issues of the trade talks include trade balance, non-tariff barriers, and creating high-paying jobs in the United States. And to this end, U.S. want to reduce its trade deficit on South Korea, opening South Korean markets and the South Korea investment to the United States. Meanwhile, South Korea want to lower reciprocal tariffs and sectoral tariffs on autos, steel, and aluminum. And during the upcoming meetings, sometime this week, I think the Korean side is expected to emphasize the importance of bilateral cooperation for manufacturing renaissance, as well as cooperation in shipbuilding, semiconductors, and other strategic sectors. Meanwhile, the U.S. side is likely to call for South Korea's investments in the United States, like what Japan did recently, and they're also opening South Korean markets through the lowering the non-tariff barriers. And specifically, these include the quarantine measures for U.S. agricultural imports, proposed rules for regulating monopolistic online platforms, and the ban on foreign tech companies storing high precision map data on overseas servers. So currently, South Korea is making an all-out effort in its tariff negotiations with the United States. So I expect that they will reach an agreement that would be beneficial for both countries sometime later.
I see. And South Korea's foreign minister could also meet with his American counterpart in Washington. So if that happens, what might be discussed there?
Yes, again, South Korean government is making its all-out effort in its tariff negotiations with the U.S. Specifically, newly appointed foreign, trade, and economic ministers and special presidential envoys, top security advisor, and lawmakers, even lawmakers from both the major parties, are visiting Washington this week. So it shows that South Korea is making a last-ditch effort by mobilizing all available political, administrative, and business capabilities to convince the Trump government to work together on a new deal within the next 10 days. And as you know, on Sunday, the National Security Advisor Ri Sung-nak arrived in Washington, and it is expected that he would meet with his counterparts like the Marco Rubio and have discussions on trade negotiations and broader alliance issues. And the Foreign Minister Jo Hyun is also planning to visit Washington sometime this week to meet his U.S. counterparts, like Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And Minister Jo mentioned that talks with the U.S. should not be seen as a zero-sum game and approach it from a broader perspective to find a win-win situation and further strengthen the ROK-U.S. alliance by thoroughly examining all aspects of comprehensive packages. And in addition, special presidential envoys led by former Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry, KCCI Chairman Park Yong-man, also plans to visit Washington this week. So the South Korea's all-out efforts shows that the trade negotiations with the United States or the Trump government could make a huge impact on its economy and overall relationship with the United States.
Right, that clearly shows that South Korea is making a lot of efforts to reach a trade deal. And in the meantime, Japan reached a trade agreement with the Trump administration yesterday. So based on what Japan gained and conceded to secure the deal, what do you think an agreement will look like for South Korea?
Yes, the President Trump said Tuesday that his government will impose 50% reciprocal tariffs on Japanese products, which is 10% lower than what was previously announced. And President Trump described the deal as perhaps the largest deal ever made, and noted that Japan pledged to make $550 billion investment in the United States, which he said will receive 90% of the profit for the American people. But he did not elaborate on the investment plan. And he also mentioned that Japan will open its market to the U.S. like cars, trucks, and rice, and certain other agricultural products. So it is expected that South Korea will take into account details of the trade deal between U.S. and Japan and may use it as a possible reference for its trade negotiations with Washington. Specifically, the presidential office said that South Korean government is reviewing the details of the deal, and if there are aspects that serve as a reference for its negotiations, it plans to take them into account. And personally, I think that considering that South Korea is in a similar situation with Japan in its trade negotiations with Washington, what Japan got from the trade deal from the United States will be a meaningful reference or threshold that South Korea needed to achieve in the upcoming trade deal with Washington. For example, if Seoul could get 15% reciprocal tariffs and 12.5% sectoral tariffs on autos or the cars, and possibly reduced tariffs on steel and aluminum. Unlike Japan, it is likely that the deal would be possibly received in both countries.
Right, we'll have to see if South Korea does manage to reach a deal this week. All right, Professor Min, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for your insight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So as countries scramble to strike trade deals with the Trump administration before the August deadline, the U.S. leader raised pressure on trading partners, saying that the tariffs will be lowered only when a country opens its market. The White House also touted a deal made earlier with Japan. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday pressed trading partners to open their markets in order to avoid much higher tariffs from the U.S. The U.S. leader made the remarks in a social media post, stressing that Washington will only lower tariffs if a country agrees to open its market, adding that those that fail to do so will be met with much higher tariffs. Trump also said through such agreements, U.S. businesses will boom. The latest remarks put pressure on South Korea and other countries to find ways to open their markets in exchange for the reduced tariff Trump unveiled in April. Seoul has been pushing to avoid the proposed 25% reciprocal tariffs, as well as sector-specific tariffs on steel, aluminum, and automobiles that would be a major blow to its export-reliant economy. Meanwhile, in touting the recent trade deal made with Japan, which lowers its tariff rate to 15%, U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said the $500 billion investment from Japan in exchange for the lowered rate will give the U.S. the ability to choose where it will be invested. In an example, Lutnick says if Trump decides to create more antibiotics in the U.S., Japan will fund the project and give it to a U.S. business that will operate the project, while 90% of the profits will go to the American taxpayer and 10% to Japan. The White House said Wednesday that the money could be used to invest in key industries.
And these funds will be spent at President Trump's discretion and direction into key industries such as energy, semiconductors, critical minerals, pharmaceuticals, and shipbuilding.
The spokesperson said there are still many more countries that need to strike a deal with the U.S., adding that Washington has sent 25 letters to countries around the world. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The European Union is also close to reaching a trade deal with the Trump administration that would impose a 15% tariff on EU imports. According to the Financial Times on Wednesday, citing a number of sources, the 15% tariff may be accepted for the bloc to avoid the 30% tariff that U.S. President Donald Trump is warning will take effect starting August. Sources say the two sides are also close to reaching an agreement on tariff exemptions on certain items such as aircraft, distilled spirits, and medical devices. Since April, goods from the EU have faced an additional 10% tariff on top of the existing average U.S. tariff rate of 4.8%. South Korea's real gross domestic product, a key indicator of the economy, grew by 0.6% on quarter in the second quarter of the year. Now that's according to the Bank of Korea on Thursday, which said the figure is largely driven by the private sector, with exports and consumption playing a major role in supporting growth. Specifically, private consumption rose 0.5%, while government spending increased 1.2%, with both domestic demand and net exports each contributing 0.3 percentage points. The bounce back came as GDP shrank by 0.2% in the first quarter compared to the last quarter of 2024. While the economy avoided consecutive contractions, investment remained sluggish, with construction and facility investment both down 1.5%. South Korean chipmaker SK hynix has reported its best ever quarterly performance in the second quarter thanks to surging demand for AI chips, including high bandwidth memory chips. According to preliminary data from the company on Thursday, its operating profit came to around $6.7 billion, up by nearly 70% on year. Sales also jumped by over 35%. Operating profits and sales both set new all-time quarterly records, breaking the previous highs in the last quarter of 2024. With less than 100 days left until South Korea hosts the annual economic meeting of leaders in the Asia-Pacific, Arirang News sat down with a senior organizer to highlight the core focus agendas and how preparations have continued throughout the months. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young has this report.
South Korea is marking the revival of K-democracy and setting the tone to inspire regional cooperation to connect, innovate and prosper amid mounting global complexity. Under the theme of building a sustainable tomorrow, South Korea will host the annual meeting of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum this October in the historic city of Gyeongju. Leaders from 21 member economies will tackle emerging challenges ranging from artificial intelligence and democratic shifts to sustainable and inclusive growth.
As this year's chair, the Republic of Korea has proposed cooperation on AI and addressing demographic changes as a key initiatives among many other global issues. We are working together with member economies to adopt these initiatives as a standalone document alongside the Gyeongju Declaration at the leaders' meeting in late October.
South Korea is a far more prominent player than it was when it last hosted APEC about 20 years ago. And what's the significance, in your opinion, on South Korea chairing this year's summit in 2025?
Over the years, Korea has built trust and meaningful contributions in the international community. Building on that, the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting, which is returning to Korea after 20 years, will serve as a great opportunity for us to show that we will restore our K-democracy and that Korea is back on track after the political challenges we faced last year. The emblem and the smile of Sheila not only reflect our warmth and hospitality and openness, but also Korea's commitment in fulfilling our role as a responsible member of the international community.
Korea's chairship comes at a pivotal time, showing the country is back on track in global governance after the martial law declaration last December compromised diplomacy at the highest level. Seoul is also positioning itself as a solutions partner, sharing lessons from its own policy tools and technological transformation to help address common regional concerns.
Through this opportunity, we hope to share the experience we've accumulated and offer innovative solutions to help address the challenges faced by the Asia-APEC region.
A key aspect of this year's approach is broader public engagement, particularly with the younger generation.
APEC pursues inclusivity and sustainability, but these cannot be achieved without public participation. We are also working to create platforms where young people can take lead in discussing and sharing their visions for the Asia-Pacific region. As part of this effort, MOFA recently held an open call for youth presenters for the public-private dialogue. We even welcomed 16 young people to join our preparatory office as an intern.
Last May, Korea's inclusive approach led to the launch of a Future Prosperity Fund dedicated to youth entrepreneurship, digital skills training, and policy research. Korea committed $1 million in seed funding. As the countdown to October 31st begins, Korea is stepping up outreach with a series of promotional initiatives, including youth-led video campaigns, exhibitions, cultural festivals, and regional media engagement.
With active participation of the public at the core, we will continue to highlight the unique charms of Korea and the host city of Gyeongju, while also carrying out a variety of promotional activities that showcase the APEC vision, the goals and values of the K-APEC, and the outcomes we hope to achieve. Through these efforts, we aim to create a more welcoming and participatory atmosphere leading up to a successful leaders meeting.
Sure, and of course all this build-up of anticipation is extremely important, especially in creating this kind of conducive atmosphere for cooperation. And well, we have great expectations for this K-APEC, as you said.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for making time for us today, and see you in Gyeongju.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. The talks between Russia and Ukraine in Istanbul ended swiftly on Wednesday with no ceasefire reached, but progress was made on additional prisoner exchanges. The two delegations met for approximately 40 minutes at Istanbul's Çağlayan Palace and discussed further prisoner swaps, but remained far apart on the terms of a ceasefire and a possible meeting of their leaders. Both sides agreed to advance a prisoner of war exchange, committing to release at least 1,200 more POWs each, including severely wounded soldiers and civilians. Russia's chief delegate Vladimir Medinsky said the bodies of 3,000 Ukrainian soldiers will also be returned. Discussions reportedly included cases of abducted children. Ukraine's delegation, led by Rustem Umerov, proposed a direct summit between President Zelensky and Putin. But by the end of August, however, Russia suggested forming online working groups on military, political, and humanitarian issues instead. The UN's top legal body, the International Court of Justice, has ruled that countries that fail to meet their climate commitments may be violating international law and could face paying reparations to countries suffering the consequences. In a unanimous advisory opinion delivered on Wednesday, the ICJ declared that wealthy and high-emitting nations are legally obliged to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, curb fossil fuel production and subsidies, and establish ambitious climate plans linked to the Paris Agreement. Judge Yuji Iwasawa emphasized that a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is a recognized human right, and that failure to take adequate climate action may amount to internationally wrongful conduct, leading to reparations for states harmed by climate impacts. The advisory is non-binding, but small island nations and low-lying states, as well as environmental groups, celebrated the landmark ruling. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres also welcomed the decision, describing it as a victory for our planet. The UN World Food Programme announced on Wednesday that food and nutrition supplies in northeastern Nigeria have been completely depleted, putting 1.3 million people at risk by the end of July. The depletion is primarily due to significant funding shortfalls, largely resulting from major donor cuts, particularly from the U.S. Agency for International Development, which previously contributed approximately 45% of the region's budget. Over 150 nutrition clinics at Borno and Yobe states are also being closed, halting treatment for more than 300,000 malnourished children. The aid agency needs $131 million to restart operations in the region this year. Chongqing Zoo in China's southwest celebrated the third birthday of a pair of twin giant pandas this week. The twins, named Yuka, the brother, and Yui, the sister, were born on July 22, 2022. A special birthday party was designed to help them stay cool in the region's summer heat, with frozen fruitcake sculptures, bamboo ice treats, and chilled play areas. While Yui was resting in a non-exhibition zone due to a mild eye condition, Chongqing Zoo officials stated that both pandas are thriving, healthy, and remain popular attractions.
The heat is really building up, with heat wave alerts getting bigger and stronger every single day. Now, most of the country is under a heat wave warning, and this heat is being added by an expanding North Pacific high pressure system. And this means the intensity of the heat is going to get worse even towards the weekend. Today's Seoul's daytime high is set to climb to a blazing 36 degrees Celsius, but by Saturday, we're looking at a high of of 38 degrees Celsius in the capital. Making conditions rougher is that burning sunshine. This afternoon, most major cities will see temperatures above 35 degrees Celsius with very strong UV rays. So please be sure to drink plenty of water frequently to stay hydrated. Your body needs it. International travelers visiting Korea, you'll need to beware of the searing heat wave through the weekend under sunny skies, except on Jeju Island, where rain is in the forecast. Please try to stay indoors during the hottest parts of the day and stay safe.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.